Parrot TV, the voice for humanity.
Hello, welcome to New York Parrot's Literary Corner. I'm Dustin Pickering, your noble and honest host. If you haven't picked up the copy of this anthology, The Literary Parrot, you're missing out on 249 pages of wonderful literature from all over the world, global anthology here. So pick up your copy today from Amazon for $18, and you will not regret it, I promise. Let us know what you think. We have a live broadcast today with Karen Osborne. She has a novels who followed a 40-year career, first as an academic administrator and then as co-owner of the Osborne Group, serving as consultant, trainer, and motivational speaker. She's the author of 3 novels. Getting It Right came out in June 2017. It was featured in Poets and Writers and Essence magazine as a best read. Tangled Lies came out in July 22nd, 2021, and Reckonings has a June 2022 release date. Karen hosts on her website a weekly video podcast, What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? Where she interviews authors, visual artists, and writer-musicians about their artistic journeys and book recommendations. Native New Yorker Karen and her husband Bob have 2 grown children and 3 grandsons. They live full-time in Port St. Lucie, Florida. Nice to meet you today, Karen, and I hope you're doing well.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to meet you, and I'm delighted to meet your audience.
Excellent. So we have a live broadcast today, so anybody is welcome to comment, ask questions. If you guys have questions out there and you're watching us on Facebook, just type them in, and we can give you some live questions here. So my first question is, what interesting insights have come from your podcast? What are you reading? What are you writing?
Oh, the best thing that has happened is that I've expanded my writer community. As a writer, it's so important that you have other writers around you, people that help each other and support each other. And I've just met so many amazing people and listened to their journeys. I've got stacks of their books, because they tell you about their books and then you're intrigued and want to buy them and read them. And I also really found out that it is such a supportive community. Writers help each other, and that's a beautiful thing.
It's definitely, I have a lot of authors that I work with as well with this podcast, as well as in my journal and Transcendent Zero Press, my press. And it's wonderful how supportive we are of each other. If you're not in it to build community, if you're trying to make a lot of money, you're probably not going to do very well. It's not the best place to make a lot of money. You're not going to hit big in the easy way. It's just not the best place to try that. But, some of us get lucky, I think, and it seems like you've had quite a bit of success in getting your novels recognized and noted. So tell us about the Poets and Writers feature. How did that work out for you?
That was so cool. It had to do with being old. Let me just say that. It was, they have a thing that they do every fall called 5 over 50. And they do a whole 2-page spread on 5 debut authors who are over 50 years old. And their rationale was that there's so much attention given to young writers, amazing, which is good. It's a good thing that we're encouraging young writers. But what about those of us who, didn't get published until we were quite older? And it was a lovely, lovely interview and piece, and it was cool.
That's wonderful. What about the Essence feature? How did that work out for you?
That was so good, Dustin. So yeah, it was, because it was a national magazine, and I was one of 6 books that they were recommending for the summer. So that just gave me some credibility that made people, so I would go to a book talk, and then I would say, oh, I don't know if you saw this. And then and suddenly you just gave you a little bit more credibility. So far, Tangled Wise has not had that experience yet. Some good reviews, but nothing, as big as a national magazine. But it just came out in July, so I am still hopeful.
So the feature in essence was getting it right.
Yes.
So
It's a beautiful book.
That's an interesting cover. That's a very artistic cover, I would say, and captivating. I think it. What is the novel cover? What are you writing about, and what are the characters? How are you motivating the characters throughout?
So in Getting It Right, which was my very first novel, it's about two women. Well, first you said, like, what are you getting at? And so let me just say that first. I wanted to write a story where the protagonist was a survivor of sexual abuse, childhood sexual abuse, but I didn't want to write a story about sexual abuse. It was just that was her experience and how it played out in her life, because it affects every part of your life. So two half sisters. Kara is half Black, half white, and she shares a father with Alex, who is white. And the story takes place in 1 week in March, on the eve of the death of their father, their white father. And he calls Alex, his white daughter, to his bedside and says, I left a child at 2 years old, and I need to make things right. I need you to find her before I die. And so the story is how Alex, who didn't have any idea that she had another sister, and much less that she had a Black sister. And so it's about Alex going and looking for Kara and what happens to them when they find each other. And there's lots of intrigue and insider trading and suspense. But at its heart, it's about family. It's about what constitutes family. And it's about redemption, forgiveness.
Interesting. What do you think readers can take from that as in their personal lives?
The things that I hoped that people, and let me tell you this, Dustin, at the end of every single book talk, every single one, without exception, conferences, bookstores, book clubs in people's homes, somebody waited till the very end, until everybody was gone, and came up to me and said, it happened to me. That was such a surprising, that didn't occur to me, that didn't occur to me that it would. One woman said to me, I've never told anybody. She was 70 something years old. And she said, I've never told anybody this before. And here she is telling me, who she just met, at a book talk, the secret that she'd been carrying since she was a teenage girl. So one of the things that I wanted people to take away is that survivors are just humans. They're not the murderers that they make them out to be on the TV and the movie. Like every time you see an axe murderer, they say, oh yeah, but he was abused when he was a child. Well, 99% of those who were abused as children don't go out and do bad things except to themselves, And then it also was a book about foster care, because Kara was in foster care all these years while he was raising his children in dysfunctional privilege. And there's 600,000 kids, 400,000 kids in foster care in the United States on any given day. And 62,000 never ever find a home, they age out. That was another thing I wanted people thinking about, even though the story wasn't about that, but the fact that was part of Kara's life.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're using the story as a kind of instructional way of having to cultivate empathy in the reader for people who are in a disadvantage of some kind, and especially young people who are kind of without any kind of I guess you could call it a safety net or a parental support. Yeah. And that was part of the story, and it shows that it sounds like a lot of people related strongly to your characters or to your storyline, and approached you and said, this is something that I experienced. So it's like a true to life story, even though I mean, were you anticipating, were the characters based on anything real that you knew of or experienced in some way, like, you know, you had personal accounts to deal with in these characterizations you created?
Yes. So I'm a survivor myself, a thriver. I used to be a survivor, but I'm a thriver. Healed and well and
Mhm.
doing well. But yes, I was the victim of sexual abuse as a child. And we also, my husband and I are also parents who adopted a child out of foster care. So I knew quite a bit about both of those. But what I wanted to write was a page turner. What I wanted
Right.
to write was something that was, had suspense and was interesting, and that mattered, but it didn't, because that wasn't what the story, was about.
Mhm.
But it shaped these women, and
Right.
they're 30 years old when you meet them. They're both 6 months apart. Wasn't he a dirty dog? And
Right.
and so kind of what all happened, and it worked out. It came out well. It was, for a first attempt. I felt very good about it.
Excellent. It sounds like a lot of other people. I mean, you had Essence and you had poets and writers took a good note of your work and what you were doing, and so it seems like, that's quite a success story there.
Thanks.
How do you feel about the attention? I mean, did you get a lot of, I mean, people, I mean, I wouldn't say come up to you and ask for your autograph or anything. I mean, do you ever get some strange kind of, people, oh, I saw you in Poets and Writers or Essence, or I heard about you from those?
Yeah, so I got a note from somebody in Paris, and this was an old friend, someone I hadn't been in touch with in a long time.
Hmm.
And she sent me an email, and she said, "Oh, OMG." She says, "I'm sitting in Paris in my daughter's hair salon, and there was the stack of magazines, and this, I'm flipping through Essence, and I go, oh, I know her."
Oh, that's
but
interesting. So,
but no, not on the
no,
great
yeah, not on the
things.
grand scale. I mean,
Yeah.
it is what it is. I mean, a success as a writer is very different. I think we enjoy our private lives anyway more than we would want to be public
Yes.
figures, as per se. I'd rather be in my house writing than doing a lot of the signings and the promotional stuff myself. I think that's typical of writers to want to be, in their private zone and writing rather than out promoting. Do you have any plans to promote your upcoming book? Do you have any things you would want to just like say, I've got this coming up on this date, or offer us a little bit of insight into how you're going to work your promotions?
Yeah. So Tangled Lies, which just came out in July, and it's a murder mystery,
Okay.
and which was a change for me. Very exciting to it was another genre to learn how to do well. But
Mhm.
again, it's female centric, and it's very fast moving, uh, and and it's women's fiction in the sense that the women in the story are very flawed, but good people that you care for and you're rooting for. But they're a mess, a hot mess,
Mhm.
and they are trying to solve this murder together. And so I have a new publisher. So a different publisher from Getting It Right, which was Akashic Books, who were lovely people, very wonderful. But Tangled Lies is with Black Rose Writing, and
Mhm.
they're a much heavier marketing
Right.
publisher. So they have been very helpful with marketing. They've gotten me into, I've had interviews. They've got me into magazines, e-magazines. They just seem to be more nimble with marketing.
Mhm.
And then I'm doing, of course, my own. So I'm doing what are you reading? What are you writing? Because while that helps other writers, it also introduces me to new markets. Like I will introduce your writing to a new market, because we're here talking to each other. And then I've been doing book talks. So I have a book talk coming up. um, I've done two already, and I have one coming up in September. But COVID, has just made
Mhm.
in-person events a little harder, a little trickier, but they seem to be picking up. I don't know, what's your experience? Are you seeing them pick up?
I haven't. I've been mostly doing the online stuff. I have not really done much public events in the last I used to do a lot of hosting here in Houston with events like at Last Concert Cafe locally, a lot of that. And then just before COVID, I stopped hosting a lot of events, and I haven't done really any signings or anything like that. I'm a poet mostly, so poets don't get a lot of attention, honestly. We're kind of the sideline of the writing business, I guess. It's hard to really get stores or anything to take you seriously when you have poetry. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of those. It's they I guess that's the attitude. But it's what I love to do, so it's what I do.
I
And
love poetry. I'm a big fan of poets. I have poet friends and just and buy books of poetry and have
do you have
features.
favorite poets that you go back to that inspire you to think a little bit and maybe even help work into your novel somehow?
They haven't. They have inspired me more about life and life journey. So Camille Fraser is a poet that I love, and Francis Coke is another poet that I love. And there's another book of poetry that I just. Where is he? This was so good. And my friend Don Jackson, a really lovely group of poets. Oh, and my cousin, is it okay to promote a cousin? My cousin Philip Robinson is an amazing poet, and he has a new book out called A Seat at Every Table.
Okay.
And isn't this interesting, Dustin? It's a memoir, but written in poetry.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that different?
That is very different. It's kind of a hybrid, There are a lot of people do a lot of the hybrid writing. I'm seeing somebody posted on Facebook recently about doing a poetry collection that's part prose, part poetry. I haven't seen a lot of that. I did publish something called The Rosary of Latitudes by Usha Kella a few years back that was prose and poetry. It was a really great book. It was a sort of a travel log and about the experience of being human in all these different countries. It's like they sort of looking at from a humanistic perspective and a spiritual perspective. It was a really good book, and I was really proud to publish that.
Yeah. Thank goodness we have poets. Thank goodness.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Without them, the literary world would be so dysfunctional and defunct. It would. And I hear some people say in your prose, a lot of prose writers they disguise their poetry in their prose. I've heard that said, and I also write short fiction, and I'm working on a couple of different longer fiction works, one novel and a sort of mini existential novel of sorts. So I do that a lot too. Like my characters they're symbolic,
Mm-hmm.
They're not just like they don't just stand in for themselves. Like you're trying to tell people something in a lot of ways. I think that's the case with writers. I mean, obviously, we want the world to kind of see our perspective, and as you mentioned at the beginning, you're wanting people to empathize with these characters as real, and then real people in the world who feel these things, and you want the world to kind of correcting some of the I guess you could call it a prejudice against that the mainstream media presents of survivors and how they're you get people that are like John Wayne Gacy or something. That's kind of like the popular story and popular imagination. And if and it's the same thing with a lot of other types of people that they're portrayed as like they just go completely wrong and they go off the wrong direction and they end up in a situation where they're doing murderous things or criminal activities. And most people that go through hard times, they make it through and they learn to see beauty and love and creation and heal. Yeah, and absolutely. And I think it's very powerful to have novels written where characters are just learning of themselves in these books. They're not out doing anything really grandiose or like becoming
just trying to live
or something. You're just trying to live their lives. I mean, you don't hear many of those kind of survivor stories. Would you like to share a passage or two from one of your books?
So the first chapter, which is only 3 pages, of Tangled Lies, will get you. You'll want to read this book. That's what I'm saying. So can I read that?
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
All right. This is chapter 1. Disquiet hung in the air. It filled Vera's lungs, traveled down her spine, and spread by tingling nerves to her limbs, fingertips, and toes. She stood still and concentrated. Wintry gusts chilled her cheeks. She listened. Nothing. She hoisted her reusable grocery bags and struggled across the parking lot, careful to step around the ice patches from the recent February storm. The cold converted her breaths to fog puffs. Already low in the sky, the pale sun made it around 4. She promised Charlie dinner by 7, chicken again, but she planned to dress it up with glazed carrots and scratch biscuits and brownies for dessert. All 3 of her adult children loved chocolate. The unmistakable stench of fresh urine assailed her nose. Vera pressed the elevator button. What a place. Her late husband, Vincent, would be sick if he saw her here. With the fat of her thumb, its cuticle ragged, she pushed again. Something else she gave up. No more manicures or pedicures, no more trips to the hair salon to straighten her curls. Charlie had to find a proper job soon. 6 months without steady pay, only a contract here or there. He paid the rent and insurance, but Vera's Social Security covered everything else. Charlie apologized for how and where they lived, and sometimes, she hated to admit, for the unsavory-looking people who dropped by. What could she do? She was a guest with no options. A positive person, she focused on the minor pleasures of her life instead, dancing in the living room to Motown, the Brian Lira show on public radio, and novels she borrowed from the library. Although Charlie decorated the apartment using inexpensive pieces he scavenged, he had made room for some of her favorite things. The walnut bookcase, her hand-knotted Persian rug, an antique floor-length mirror, and 2 wing chairs covered in plush mocha. There were days, however, when she cringed at the trash-edged grass and the hall's vexing brown stains. For the 3rd time, Vera hit the elevator's up button. Please, God, send it down. She stopped. How selfish to pray for a working elevator while children starved in Somalia. She took the prayer back and waited. The super had promised to fix it more than a week ago. Never mind. She was not too old to climb 4 flights. She started up the narrow staircase. By the time she reached the 3rd floor landing, her breathing became audible. God created elevators for a reason. She pushed on and made it to her front door, anticipating comfort and quiet. One bag still in her hand and the other on the welcome mat, Vera inserted her key. The door swung open. Silence. Charlie? Brandy's yelps pierced the eerie quiet. Cold air stung her ankles. Charlie's writing desk lay crippled, almost halved. Wood splinters scattered across the Persian rug. Her treasured bookcase sat face down next to the desk. Papers, books, and shards of glass spiraled out from the epicenter. The grocery bag slammed to the ground. Coffee and canned tomatoes thumped onto the hardwood floor. A dozen eggs puddled around her feet, oozing over a bloody footprint. She stepped inside. Brandy barked almost a human wail, strained against her collar and leash, bound to something outside the opened living room window. Blood smeared her matted coat. Angling around the debris, right hand pressed against the wall, Vera followed the blood smears to Charlie's bedroom. The stench of raw meat, vomit, and feces filled her nostrils. A metallic taste made her gag. Splattered blood streaked the walls, dark red, almost black. His head faced her on a blood-soaked mattress. Huge brown eyes, always amused, stared opaque and blank. His open mouth seemed to call to her. Cocoa brown skin stretched over sunken cheekbones. Her legs sagged. A weight crushed her chest. She forced her gaze away from his, and only then she saw the rest of his body, 2 feet away, severed from his head.
Hmm. Wow. So she comes into her apartment, and there's her partner's,
Grown son,
decapitated.
her grown son, she finds murdered.
Oh, wow. So it was her son.
Yeah, this is her
Wow.
son Charlie, one of her 3 children,
Mhm.
and she's a widow, hit some hard times, and then the story picks up 3 months later when she's in a car accident.
Hmm.
And Danny, who's 25 years old and on the run, she skipped out on her rent. Vera is black and Danny is white. Vera's 70 and Danny's 25. And Danny witnesses the car accident. And as she's looking at it, something's not right. Something is not right. And so she tracks Vera down and tells her that she thinks that the accident looked staged to her. It looked deliberate to her. And so the two pair up over the course of a week in May, and they pair up and to solve Charlie's murder.
Wow. So I'm wondering in your previous book, there's a lot of the racial dynamics. Does that play a part in the Entangled Lies as well?
Yes. So I like to, I think that we're all human. We're all human.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like writing stories where they're multicultural.
Right.
Because I think it lets people see other people out of different eyes. It makes you, I want people to like my characters, my flawed, crazy characters. They're not perfect, and they're not stereotypical. They're human being women. And so I like writing about racial differences and class differences in terms of money and not money, and just so that people can see that people are people,
right?
Without sugarcoating, the reality of things,
Mm-hmm.
without pretending that everything is perfect. I'm not trying to sugarcoat things. With the first book, when Kara meets her white sister, a lot of racial things come up for both of them.
Mm-hmm.
Alex, who's white, she never expected this, and now she has this half black sister that she didn't even know existed before. So it's not like it's all pretty, but I think by making both characters sympathetic, just like making Vera and Danny flawed but sympathetic, it makes you think. I hope. That's my hope.
Right. So when you create these characters, do you have, I don't know, I think, some writers will take notes in their, a journal to kind of give some ideas as to what they're going to create, or do you just imagine these in your head and just write the story, or is there a way that you keep track of plot and the dynamics going on within and what these people are and what's going on in their heads without actually just the simple writing itself?
So yes, and yes.
Oh, wow.
It starts, and this is just true. It starts with them talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
These women start talking to me.
Right.
And they're in my head and they're having conversations. And sometimes they take me places I hadn't intended, so I'm thinking about the plot and I'm working on the arc, but one of them just takes me someplace else. It's her decision, and she decides we're going someplace else. But I do I always have a notebook with me, always. And I hear a word or a phrase. I see somebody, I see, a description. I'm on an airplane and I see somebody across the way and I think, that's just what, and I jot down all of her characteristics and sounds. And my husband gave me a T-shirt that said, "Careful what you say to her. You might end up in her novel."
Yeah. There's a lot of the jokes about that. There's a cartoon you see. So I see sometimes where it's the parents are approaching the book signing for their kid, and they said we wouldn't have done it if we know you were going to be a writer.
That's right.
Yeah, it's interesting how you can take like these little snippets of life and turn them into a full story. I mean, do you
Yeah.
just kind of create these amalgamations from variety of things going on around you, or is there a solid characteristic that when you're writing a character, sort of plan this out, or does it, like you said, it just sort of take you to a different place? And
They start they start in my head, but
Mhm.
I do really think through their characteristics. I want to
Right.
know what are the things that make them really good people, and what are the things that make them flawed and difficult, and what's their voice. The voice is always the trickiest thing, to capture their voice so that everybody's voice isn't the same.
Hmm.
That when you're reading, this is Vera. When you're reading, this is Danny speaking. And there's a third character in Entangled Lies, Erica. And Erica has two voices. One voice is her public voice, where she speaks very properly all the time. But in her head, she curses like a sailor. And so while she's like, I'm sitting here having this lovely conversation with you, but then during a pause, I'm thinking these other thoughts in rough language. So
Right.
Erica has a very distinct voice. So I do work on voice to make sure that it fits the personalities, and then plot. I want to make sure that all my books take place over 1 to 2 weeks. And my third book that's coming out next year is the same. It takes place over 2 weeks with an epilogue. I just try to keep it tight and the chapters short so that people want to know what happens next.
Interesting. So it's a lot of, I mean, the characters sort of possess you in a lot of ways, and you're brought into a world that it's both tangible and intangible. I mean, it's in your head, and it's like, you write it as you're writing it out, you're creating it. So I mean, it's quite interesting how that works. I mean, I can't imagine, having writing out something. As a writer, I do this too, but I can't imagine how some people would react to, like these characters possess me in my head, and they I just write them out, write their story out, and I create. You have the dynamic of their internal dynamics and their, what's going on in their world around them. I'd like to appreciate our viewers for a moment here. We have Elizabeth Robin, Stephen Cole, and Openami Adesina. Thank you so much for watching the show. It's wonderful you guys are out there participating. Feel free to leave some comments. Tell us what you're thinking. Ask questions of your own if you want. Just drop us a line there in the comment section as you're watching. And again, appreciate your viewership that we're getting right now. We're broadcasting live here with Karen E. Osborne. She's author of Tangled Lies and Getting It Right. So tell us a little bit about your next book. What are your plans to release that? Are you using the Black Rose Publishing as well with that?
Yes. So a wonderful, wonderful thing happened. Inquiry is so hard, trying to get your book published, sending out queries, query, you get rejections. It's painful.
It is. It's very painful.
Oh my gosh. And so for each of these books, it was a lot of sending out and getting rejections. So when my publisher, Reagan Roth, when Tangled Lies came out, 1 week later, he contacted me and he said, "Do you have another book?" Oh my gosh. Yes, I do.
Mhm.
I do.
Wow. Yeah.
That was like the best, when I got the contract for the first book, that was like the best moment of my writer life. When my agent said to me, "Oh, Karen, I have an offer. I found an offer for you." And I was Dustin, you should have seen me. I was so professional. I asked questions. I was just very professional. And when I hit the door to leave, I cried all the way to the parking lot. I'm like, oh, I'm going to get published, So then, with the second book, and when Black Rose said they were interested, I felt really good. I felt happy.
Mm-hmm.
But when Reagan said, "Do you have another book? Send it to me." That was like that moment walking out the door, So I sent it to him, and he said, "I love it, and let's get it published." And he sent me a contract and a date, June next year. So I'm really excited that it was 4 years between the first and second book, but it'll only be a year. Like Grisham,
Mm-hmm. The jogging of the mind going and the writing and getting the writing done. Why do you think we go through that as writers? Like the rejection and the writing itself is frustrating and painful enough. I mean, you got these guys in your head talking to you like, blah, 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 write my story. And then you got to write that story out. And then now you've got to get it out into the world in some capacity. Why do we go through that as writers? Is there something compelling us?
And to be judged, be judged.
They told you, oh, that's not life, or that's hoopla, that's garbage, or that's your writing is terrible. I don't like it. Your ideas are offensive to me. And then in today's world, everything's offensive. I mean, it seems like everyone's offended by something, and it's like it's there's just all the doing with the public, as I mentioned earlier. The public out there, it's like they're vicious sometimes. And so it's really kind of frightening to put your book out there after you go through the pains of writing it. It's your child, and you're letting it out in the world. Now people are saying what, and you don't know. Maybe someone's thinking something that they're not saying, or they're saying something that you don't hear, which is good. Don't tell me what you think. That's bad. So why do you think we go through that as writers? I mean, it's like, what is it compelling us to motivating us? I mean,
I think artists of all kinds first write, play, compose, create for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But then you've got something you want to say, and whether it's visually you say it, or musically you want to say it, or through your writing. And I told myself when the first one got published, I told myself that this would be enough. This would be enough. If nothing else happened, this is enough. But I was kidding myself, because I wanted my second baby to get out there in the world and people to enjoy it. And then my third one, it's a wonderful feeling to share these people that you've created with other people and have them talk about them and discuss them as if they are real people. Because they are. It's a joy. It's just a wonderful joy. And the road is painful, but the reward, I think, is amazing. Getting good reviews and having people write wonderful things about it, and friends, send me pictures of them reading the book, and it's a wonderful thing. It's hard though.
Yes, it is. It's some people might say, it's hard to raise a child, but people still have children, right? I mean, it's a very similar thing. I mean, it really is. You put something out in the world that it has on uncertain terms. You don't know how a child will turn out, and you have to put all this effort and attention and
love.
And love, obviously, yes, love and attention and care. And if you can't do that, please don't have children. I mean, I'm sorry. There are a lot of bad parents out there that really don't care enough about their kids, as we all know. Just don't bother. Just save us the trouble. I mean, but as a writer, I mean, in my own personal experience, I mean, there's a little bit of a worry sometimes, like, is this going to be received well? Is this people going to think of this? What are they going to think? Do you ever worry about that in your own writing, that somebody may misconceive what you're trying to say, or they may try to misrepresent you in some way?
Yeah. I find beta readers, I don't know if you use beta readers.
Sometimes, yes.
I have a trusted crew of beta readers who are honest with me. I trust them. I trust their intelligence. They're all avid readers. Some of them are writers themselves. And they're smart. And so I send it to them first. You know, when I think I'm done, I send it out to my beta readers, and I get one of them is my son, who is also a writer, and they give me such good, honest feedback,
Mm-hmm.
and they catch things like somebody might be offended by this. They catch things, like I lost my attention here, or this didn't quite ring true. You know, they give you, really good information. And I listen. I don't do everything that everybody says, but
Right.
I take in everything everybody says, and I think it through. I don't reject anything. I don't reject anybody's comments. I consider them, and I look back, and I, and make changes that I believe work and make sense. Because in the end, your readers are who are so important. Your readers are, in the end, you want them to understand, appreciate, read the book. So beta readers have helped me a lot. And then I almost always send it to a really good editor.
Absolutely.
Because you just want it to be, they catch all those little inconsistencies. They catch all those, those other small things. So and then only then did I start sending it to agents or sending it to publishers.
Long process. So as we end the program here, what are your final words to our viewers? What advice would you like to impart to viewers and people watching this program?
If you are a reader and you love to read as many different genres as you can. Reading is such, it's a gift. It's a gift my husband and I have given our grandchildren, and they're readers. They love to read. If you can read, as my 10-year-old said, if you can read, you can learn anything. So, encouraging, read to your children from the time they're born. Read to them. Readers rule the world. And then to the writers out there, don't give up. Don't give up. Don't give up. Don't get discouraged.
Absolutely.
And keep your craft. Pay attention to your craft. Work on your craft. I still take workshops. I'm still trying to learn how to be a better writer, even as I have books published. I work on my craft all of the time. And I hope that you'll drop in and see, and I hope you will too, Dustin, to come and join me on What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? You'll meet some amazing, amazing artists, and you'll hear about some really good books.
Excellent. So thank you for joining us today, Karen. We talked with Karen Osborne today at the Literary Parrot and Literary Corner at New York Parrot's program for writers and creative minds. We have released this book, The Literary Parrot. If you can see this is a wonderful collection of literature. You guys got to get this book. It's amazing. It's got all authors, global authors all over the world, from all the way across to the east to the west. We didn't spare any countries or continents. We scoured the earth for great writers, and we put them in this book, and they've been on this program. We want you in our book. Our next series 2 will be out in December 1st. So that'll be a great time for people to look into Christmas presents for friends and family and fans and supporters. So if you want to be on the program, definitely be in touch with me, Literary Corner at NewYorkParrot.com. That will be my email. I'm Dustin Pickering. And today it's been a wonderful discussion with Karen E. Osborne about her books, Tangled Lies and Getting It Right. So don't give up if you're writing. Just keep it up. If you're being rejected quite a bit, hey, we all are. It's the same boat for all of us. Just keep it up. Keep submitting. Get your work out there as much as possible. Look for 100 rejections a year if you can, because that's the rule now. There's definitely a good chance one of those people out there will pay attention to your work. When you send out to a lot of people, you're going to get a lot of rejections and a lot of support as well in response to that. So thank you for joining us again, Karen, and thanks to our viewers. And if you're viewing right now, please leave us some comments. Tell us what you'd like to hear from us. If you want to be on the program, definitely be in touch with me again. So this has been the Literary Corner, New York Parrot. I'm signing off. Dustin Pickering.